Ukraine waited for Russian defenses to fragment, then shattered Olenia Bay from within in under 9 seconds.
At 4:12, Olenia Bay submarine base at Olenia Guba lay under a cold northern sky when the first wave arrived. Without warning, dozens of Ukrainian reconnaissance UAVs and fast-moving USVs surged in from multiple bearings, slicing across the harbor approaches. Long-range loitering drones, each valued at roughly $30,000, and kamikaze UAVs costing under $5,000 began probing defensive seams, while electronic warfare platforms disrupted sensors. Offshore, Yasen-class submarines and Admiral Gorshkov frigates maneuvered defensively as the aircraft carrier Admiral Kuznetsov loomed as a mobile threat. This was not a raid, but a deliberate multi-axis strike aimed at crippling a submarine hub worth billions of dollars. Before we dive deeper into the battle, share your location so we can know if you're close to the conflict. If you watched the previous video on Ukraine's drone strike against Russia's $2-3 billion helicopter base in Moscow, you'll recognize the shift. This wasn't retaliation. It was a calculated expansion. Moments after the initial impact at Olenia Bay, Ukraine initiated a sweeping sensor suppression operation. Long-range reconnaissance drones, each costing roughly $30,000, fanned out across the fjord, mapping heat signatures and radar gaps. Meanwhile, sea-skimming USVs valued under $25,000 moved in tight patterns near the docks, streaming real-time telemetry to command hubs hundreds of miles away. High-power electronic warfare systems surged online. Ground-based jammers jammed overlapping frequency bands, while airborne EW pods flooded the battle space with ghost signals. The result? A thick electronic haze that distorted radar scopes, severed lock-on attempts, and triggered false positives. Russian CIWS gunners fired at shadows, depleting munitions on illusions. NATO-aligned F-16 seconds, worth over $30 million per unit, held a wide combat orbit overhead. They didn't strike, but their presence shut down Russian interceptors, securing the corridor for follow-up waves and logistics aircraft. Russian S-300 and Buk batteries struggled for target clarity. In one case, a Pantsir fired on a friendly vessel after losing signal fidelity. None of this was about destruction. It was about disruption, unraveling Russia's awareness, overloading its response cycle, and forcing command centers to operate in fear of what they couldn't see. In the new age of warfare, vision is vulnerable, and Ukraine just turned out the lights. Hit like if you found this interesting. Comment 1 for Ukraine, 2 for peace, 3 if you don't like this news. Once Russian sensors began to flicker and blind spots opened along the shoreline, Ukraine pushed the fight down to the water itself. Small strike USVs, each costing roughly $20,000, accelerated toward Olenia Bay from multiple angles, riding low and fast to stay beneath fragmented radar coverage. Their targets were not ships at first, but the nervous system of the harbor. Sensor pylons, mooring controls, fuel valves, and exposed communications gear lining the piers. As the first USVs drew fire, kamikaze drones joined from above. Loitering drones valued at around $30,000 dropped sharply onto coastal gun pits and shore-based radar trailers, forcing Russian crews to split attention between air and surface threats. FPV drones, some costing less than $5,000, threaded through smoke and tracer fire, striking antenna arrays and detonating against power junctions that fed the docks. Every hit was small, but together they fractured coordination. Russian surface units reacted quickly. Admiral Gorshkov-class frigates pushed forward to screen the harbor entrance, while Yasen-class submarines maneuvered offshore to protect submerged assets and prevent follow-on strikes. Deck guns opened up, CIWS mounts spun at full rate, and decoys were deployed to confuse incoming craft. But the problem was scale. Defending against dozens of fast, low-cost platforms at once forced commanders into constant trade-offs: protect the pier, protect the ships, or protect the submarines below. At one point, 2 USVs deliberately exposed themselves to draw fire, allowing a third to slip through and detonate near a sensor mast at the primary berth. Damage control teams rushed in as alarms echoed across the base, while tug crews worked to keep critical vessels from drifting into blocked channels. What unfolded was not a single decisive blow, but a methodical unpeeling of defenses. Each USV or drone forced a response that revealed another weakness. Ammunition stocks dwindled. Crews rotated under pressure. Communication lagged. From a combat reporting perspective, this was classic defense fragmentation. Many small strikes, launched nearly simultaneously, reduced a complex harbor defense into isolated reactions. By the time Russian commanders attempted to re-establish a unified perimeter, Olenya Bay no longer functioned as a single system, but as a collection of stressed, disconnected points struggling to hold. In the next video, we reveal how Ukrainian jets and long-range missiles exploited this chaos from the air, turning Olenya's weakened coastline into a launchpad for precision strikes deep into Russia's northern fleet infrastructure. With Olenya Bay's sensors scattered and coastal gunners chasing decoys, the assault shifted skyward. From staging airfields over 200 miles to the southwest, mixed packages of F-16 seconds and Allied strike fighters entered on staggered bearings, each wave masked by low-level sea clutter and the lingering electronic fog. Their first runs were pure harassment afterburners, flaring as they slashed across the bay at near supersonic speed, forcing every surviving gun and missile battery to track and fire, burning through precious ammunition. Moments later, the real payloads arrived. From well outside Russian interceptor range, precision-guided cruise missiles arced in at high subsonic speed. Their inertial guidance tied to satellite updates. One after another, they drove into pre-mapped targets, buried fuel depots that fed submarine patrols, hardened weapons bunkers near the pier, and key service wharves. Each strike aimed not at personnel, but at the infrastructure that allowed Russia's undersea fleet to sortie. Fireballs climbed hundreds of feet as secondary explosions rolled through fuel tanks, briefly turning the fjord into a ring of flame. The Russian Navy fought to blunt the onslaught. Admiral Kuznetsov surged forward from its holding line, launching Su-33 fighters to contest the airspace, while Yasin-class escorts lost Yakunt, SSN-26, supersonic missiles in counter-battery roles. Close-in weapon systems rattled off streams of 30mm fire, shredding some inbound drones and missiles, but every intercept drew resources away from protecting subsurface exits. By the time the strike waves wheeled south to refuel, the calculus of the battle had shifted. Olenya Bay's submarine operations were temporarily paralyzed, its fueling grid fractured, and its command rhythm broken. The fight had evolved into a duel between airborne agility and armored maritime defense, and for now, the air had seized the initiative. The battle next collapsed into brutal close quarters where every yard of water mattered. As dusk bled into the high-latitude night, small strike USVs knifed through gaps left by earlier missile hits, each barely the size of a pickup truck, and racing at 40 knots. FPV swarms, no bigger than hobby drones but loaded with shaped charges, skimmed a few feet above the chop, diving at radar masts and exposed weapon mounts on Russian frigates and patrol boats. Their sudden plunges created a chaos of splintered decks and blinding spray. Yasin-class and Admiral Gorshkov-class crews fought back with everything at hand. Close-in weapon systems raked the approaches with walls of 30mm fire, while deck gunners fired continuous 12. 7mm burst, trying to burn a corridor of shrapnel through the incoming waves. The air filled with tracer arcs and the whine of ricochets, but the attackers' sheer numbers and erratic maneuvers kept defensive radars saturated. For every USV destroyed, another slipped inside the defensive ring, forcing damage control teams to race from hatch to contain fires and flooding. Inside the harbor, sailors scrambled to keep critical submarines sealed and ready for tow. Damage control parties fought compartment fires, with seawater pumps and portable extinguishers, while engineers rerouted power through jury-rigged cables to keep ballast systems alive. Even as alarms blared, robot minesweepers deployed from Ukrainian support craft swept key lanes to ensure safe passage for rescue boats. On shore, combat engineers and medics pushed forward behind armored ambulances, carving emergency corridors through rubble and twisted pier segments. They ferried wounded sailors, Russian and Ukrainian alike, to triage barges waiting just offshore. The firefight thus carried a dual rhythm: the harsh mechanical urgency of ships in contact and the quieter, stubborn effort to save lives. By midnight, Olenja Bay had become a grinding contest of endurance and coordination, where the side that kept communications intact and damaged crews moving would decide who held the water by dawn. The struggle entered a new dimension once both commands unleashed their heaviest electronic warfare assets. Powerful shipborne jammers and truck-mounted arrays flooded the spectrum, from VHF to Q-band, with shifting noise and false echoes. Control signals broke apart mid-sentence, secure voice channels dissolved into static. On tactical screens, phantom contacts winked in and out destroyers where no hulls existed, periscopes in empty water. Operators on both sides found themselves hunting ghosts, while trying to protect the real convoys still maneuvering through the bay. Ukrainian planners seized that confusion. Long-range reconnaissance drones already circling at 25,000 feet switched to passive mode, silently relaying encrypted images through laser links immune to most jamming. In parallel, cyber teams injected carefully crafted decoys into Russian networks, broadcasting false damage reports and bogus submarine departure times. Each misleading packet forced Russian commanders to reroute scarce assets, compounding delays at precisely the moment they needed coherence. Russia countered with its own playbook. From inland bunkers and mobile relays on the Kola Peninsula, electronic countermeasures tried to peel away the fog. Yasin-class submarines deployed to deep water shelves using low-frequency bursts to triangulate the real drone carriers, while Admiral Gorshkov-class escorts pulsed radar sweeps meant to collapse the illusion of multiple phantom fleets. The bay became a living chessboard of invisible moves and counter-moves. Amid the electromagnetic turbulence, NATO humanitarian corridors opened like hidden doors. Using frequencies agreed upon through neutral intermediaries, medical flights and rescue hovercraft marked safe lanes for civilian fishermen and for wounded sailors, Russian and Ukrainian alike, to exit the combat zone. Unarmed NATO support ships arrived with surgical teams, portable desalination units, and fire suppression gear, allowing both sides to treat casualties and clear burning piers without fear of attack. This command phase was less about firepower than about command tempo. By turning information into a weapon, spreading selective truths, and fabricating convincing fictions, Ukraine and its partners stretched every Russian decision cycle and drew defenders into chasing mirages. In doing so, they shifted the logistical burden. Russia now had to guard its own civilian lanes and verify every sensor reading, while Ukraine conserved strength for the strikes still to come. The battle's center of gravity moved from steel and explosives to data and deception, setting the stage for the campaign's final push. The fight surged to its climax as every element of the Ukrainian strike plan came into play at once. Swarms of drones and USVs pressed in from multiple bearings, while high-cover F-16 seconds dove to release precision munitions. Offshore fire support ships lobbed guided shells, and EW teams blanketed Russian command circuits with fresh bursts of interference. Their combined aim was surgical but decisive. Fuel farms, submarine berths, and hardened command nodes that tied Olenja Bay to the Northern Fleet. Russian commanders faced stark choices. Some captains ordered their Yasin-class submarines to slip into deeper fjords under emergency ballast, while others argued to stay and hold the pier. Every delay risked trapping crews beneath collapsing infrastructure. Amid the exchange, isolated ceasefire pockets briefly formed. Ukrainian rescue craft and NATO medical boats used those fragile windows to evacuate wounded sailors, friend and foe alike, and guide nearby civilians to protected coves. For several tense hours, the harbor was a mosaic of explosions and rescue flares, of warships trading salvos beside stretcher teams, guiding casualties across makeshift gangways. By first light, command cables lay severed, and the submarine pens were silent, leaving a powerful message. Victory measured not only by destroyed steel, but by lives deliberately spared in the storm. Olenja Bay fell silent with its submarine berths crippled, fuel depots gutted, and patrol cycles broken. The core objective accomplished. Strategically, Moscow must now scatter its Yasin-class subs, Admiral Gorshkov frigates, and even the upkeep of Admiral Kuznetsov across wider Arctic waters diluting its undersea power. Yet a hard question remains. Can any northern base still be called secure, or will Russia strike back with new tactics and heavier air defenses? The operation proves that layered drone, USV, air, naval, EW coordination can rewrite the battlefield, while disciplined humanitarian actions turn military success into lasting legitimacy.